Welcome, everyone. It is 11 o'clock, and it looks like everyone is in the process of joining, and a couple of people are still connecting to audio. My name is CJ Shields from the Center for Teaching Excellence, and I'm thrilled to have all of you with us today to learn more about one of our great enterprise tools here at Texas A&M, Perusall. This is part of our Canvas faculty workshop. So I'm going to run through just a few things to set up the meeting, and then we have two individuals who I will introduce shortly who will be leading the majority of today's session. For the next 5 minutes or so here, we are going to go through a brief introduction, and please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as well. We'd love to know which college or department you're from, what you do, how you're interested in using Perusall, all of those types of things. And then Dr. David Gomillion from the Mays Business School is going to present us with a faculty use case and has some slides he has prepared for us. And then for the bulk of the presentation, for about 35 minutes, Nolan Quella from Perusall is going to lead the session and talk a little bit about how to create and use Perusall assignments. We'll then have a brief Q&A, and we will conclude with a survey and some feedback from y'all. So again, welcome to today's session. It is designed to be engaging. Feel free to have Perusall open in another screen if you would like to. And as features are demonstrated, feel free to test them out. Please use the chat to introduce yourself, ask any questions you have. I will be monitoring the chat as our presenters give their input, and I will provide answers or resources as they are needed. If the presenters ask for verbal input, feel free to use your mic. Otherwise, please make sure your mic is muted so that we don't have any background feedback noise. And most importantly, have fun and learn some new information today, because Perusall is a great tool and has so many uses here at the university. Again, our two speakers, the first one who I will turn over to shortly is Dr. David Gomillion, who's a clinical assistant professor and the director of the Council for the Management of Information Systems, both in the Mays Business School, and we are pleased to have Dr. Gomillion with us today. And also Nolan Quella, who is the Perusall engagement specialist, who is assigned A&M and often leads our Perusall engagement and training sessions. So we're thrilled to have Nolan with us as well. Our learning outcomes for today: we hope to discover the basic features of Perusall, investigate the implementation of a faculty power user, analyze some use cases for Perusall, design a Perusall assignment that maximizes student engagement, and examine a Perusall assignment that I have the same thing there. I apologize for that. And that's supposed to be examine, I apologize for the typo, examine the Perusall rubric and grading. So I apologize for that typo. I must have reverted to an older version. But the examine is supposed to be the rubric and the grading. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I will turn it over to Dr. Gomillion.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. David Gomillion, and my title is slightly out of date. I am now a clinical associate, but close enough. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share a screen. I've got just a few little slides to lead a quick discussion on what I use Perusall for and why I think it's a good fit for my goals. All right. So as already introduced, I am in the Mays Business School. I teach management information systems classes. So my average student is kind of on the technical side, but I find that Perusall is not difficult to use. All right, so as an overview of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about my goal, some alternatives I've looked at or used, kind of a reminder that you get whatever you incentivize, and then I'm going to talk about why I like Perusall best. And then I'll kind of run you through a few things on Perusall and what it looks like and how I use it. All right, so my real goal is to make sure students are prepared for class, right? That's all I'm really trying to do with Perusall. That usually involves reading and watching videos, stuff like that. So I like to use a lot of different types of media. Sometimes they're reading a book. Usually they're reading articles, because in MIS, textbooks are notoriously out of date, right? By the time they get printed, they're usually a little bit out of date. And so there are a lot of articles, some videos that I record, some videos that I find online that are really good. So that kind of thing. All right, so here are some alternatives. Here are some ways that I've tried to incentivize students to come to class prepared. First off, I used reading quizzes, right? Kind of the standard, ask them 10 questions that were obvious to anyone who actually read. It seemed to go okay in my classes until I had a section of 80 students and they were talking in the back and I could hear them discussing the questions with each other. But there's one of me and 80 of them and trying to prove exactly who did it in a huge room that had the stadium seating. It was very difficult to identify that, kind of a little bit of a challenge. Also, if I did a reading quiz, they tended to cram by trying to game the quiz, right? What's Dr. G going to ask me today? Okay, that's the only thing I need to learn. And then they would share notes with each other like, hey, this is what I think he's going to ask. And so they would basically create crib sheets and each student would take one turn and then they would pass them around. So that didn't really accomplish my goal of having them prepared for class. That only prepared them for the quiz. So then I tried student attestation. I said, okay, who read the book? They would take a little like one question, true, false quiz. I read the book before class today, trying to hold them a little bit accountable, but also expecting them to have integrity. That didn't go so well. So we had some students who would attest to things that were clearly not true. So several of the people in the department use participation points. I'm not saying anything bad about them, but when I have the discretion to say, okay, your participation was worth more than this other person's participation, my question was, well, is there any unconscious bias coming at play in here? So I was a little bit concerned about that, and I got pretty uncomfortable because the last thing I want to do is accidentally discriminate. So then I used discussion boards, and I still use discussion boards in some of my classes. So this, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the challenge is I post like 3 questions and the first response is very thought-provoking, very good, very detailed, very deep, very good, very on point. And all the rest are, yeah, I agree. Me too. Yeah. And so like the first person who runs into a question, like they get a really good experience and everyone gets to read their response and that's wonderful, but everything else is kind of throwaway. So then I found myself every day, I would log in and post 2 more questions and 2 more questions so that as people came throughout the week, they could each have a good experience and we could hear from everyone. And then it got to be a lot to manage and grade. So then there's Perusall. And I use Perusall extensively, which is why I'm talking to you today. But there is a challenge because it's a system. And every system that has an algorithm can be gamed. And there are ways to game the Perusall grading system. And there are YouTube videos on exactly how to do so. So I've watched the videos. I know how to game it. I actually tell my students on the first day of class, there are videos on how to game the system. Here's what they say. And I walk them through it. And then I'm like, here's why I'm okay with this, right? Writing incomplete sentences is the #1 way to game Perusall grading. I don't find writing incomplete sentences to be negative at all, so I'm okay with that. Using correct punctuation, so on and so forth. So you're going to hear more about this, I'm sure, but Perusall uses machine learning to compare a student's comment with some of the material and mostly with other student comments to figure out which ones are high quality, which means someone has to grade those, right, to start feeding the algorithm in the early days. And of course, the people feeding those are professors, and professors find complete sentences and proper punctuation to be desirable. So recognize there are a lot of alternatives to try to get students to come to class ready. But with most of these, what I found is that what I was measuring and incentivizing wasn't what I actually wanted, right? So having them be able to cram for a quiz was not what I wanted. Having them know how to lie on a quiz, that's not what I wanted. Me showing my unconscious bias, that's not what I wanted. One person to actually say something intelligent and everyone else to say, yep, I agree, was not what I wanted. So Perusall gets me as close as I have found so far to having students come to class, having read the material and prepared. So you get what you incentivize. I want them to come prepared. So I want them to read, hopefully comprehend. I can't guarantee you comprehension, but at least read it. And I want them to get their questions answered. Now, here's the cool thing about Perusall. When students post a comment, their discussion group also sees the comment. So you might set that to be your whole class. When I have classes of like 200 and something students, I have smaller discussion groups of 15 to 20, somewhere in there, so that as they ask questions, several of their peers see their questions, and their peers get points for responding. So if they see a question and they know the answer, then when they respond, they get a couple of points. Well, now students are getting their questions answered quickly, and I'm in my office and have no idea the question was even asked yet, right? I haven't looked at the report yet, but there it is, ready to go, which is awesome, right? It's amazing. It really, really helps me keep up with especially very large sections, or I use it a lot with my asynchronous sections where I have working professionals. They tend to do their work at 11 o'clock at night. I'm not usually awake and logged into a discussion board or wanting to interact with students at 11 o'clock at night, but their peers are, right? And so they can answer each other's questions. And basically, we're deputizing all of our students to become TAs, sharing what they know. And we all know that when someone has to teach something to someone else, they start to understand it at a deeper level, and they actually gain more mastery themselves. So it's a really cool opportunity to bring the conversation to a lot of people where everyone in class can participate and have a voice, and everyone becomes kind of deputized to help teach the material. So again, I'm pretty bullish on Perusall. It's really helped me deliver, I think, better classes. So what I like best in Perusall, first off, it incentivizes reading. So they get automatically scored points for opening the readings and reading all the way to the end, right? That's just the basic part of the typical rubric. It incentivizes discussions. Again, on the standard rubric that Perusall uses, they are required to make a certain number of comments, and then the quality is measured through machine learning. So that they can't just say, me too, I agree, or anything like that. That's not going to count. They have to rephrase it. They have to make it tied to the class material. And by the way, if someone says something inappropriate, their peers will flag it. And as soon as that happens, I get an email and I get to look at it and say, yeah, I agree. Or I think in context, it's okay. And I click a button and it gives them credit and it unlocks the comment again for others to see. I had two students who had an interpersonal disagreement, and they were trying to mark each other's comments on Perusall as inappropriate to try to impact each other's grades. I had a quick little meeting with them and reminded them why that was not ethical. And I clicked one button and all the comments were back, and it was no big deal, right? No harm, no foul. But it automatically grades things. I mentioned that I have this in a section that has over 200 students in it. Trying to grade participation with over 200 students is pretty tricky. But on Perusall, it's automatic, right? So I post the videos, I post a few questions from class, I post my notes, whatever it is that I think they should be discussing, I post it. They all get to read it. They all get to highlight whatever it is they had questions about and ask questions, or highlight something and say, hey, when I worked at, Deloitte over the summer, I had a very similar experience. And I actually get a lot of students sharing work experience through Perusall with each other, which makes it a lot richer, right? Try having those discussions with 200 students in one room. That's just not going to happen. But as soon as you have this online asynchronous platform where they can log in at their leisure and say, hey, I had this experience, suddenly they're learning from each other, and it brings a new richness to the class that's just really hard to do in a large section. But probably my favorite tool that's built into Perusall is called the confusion report. So on an assignment, right before I walk into class, I click on the confusion report and it shows me the top comments, the unanswered questions. Like, it shows me very quickly, all right, who's engaging? What were the questions? What did other people add on to? So that as I walk into class, I can just bring that up on my laptop or my tablet. I'm looking at that and I say, hey, we had some really good questions from the discussion this week, right? Someone wanted to know about this type of database management system. Let me explain it to you, right? It helped me see where students were and how many other students there were that were interested in it, right? I don't see every question. I only see the ones that were really popular. So it helps me craft my class very quickly to the questions that are most common throughout the class. All right, so as mentioned, I've used it in several classes. I'm going to actually stop this screen share and then share actually my Perusall real quick. All right. Okay, so here's my Perusall. I'm telling on myself here, right? Here are my current courses with it open. I've got study abroad. I've got some grad classes. I've got an online asynchronous grad class. This 28141 has 242 students. So I've used it with a wide range. And then if I scroll down, you can see I'm not exactly new to Perusall, right? I've used it for several classes. I find that as a tool, it helps me walk into class more prepared. So I'm just going to click on one of my random classes. So this is a networking class for undergraduate students. Most days when we have lecture of new material, I'll post a Perusall. And you can see 3, 6, 2 parts, like a few things they need to read to be prepared. I try not to overload them with too much. On days when it's a project work day, there's usually no Perusall, so they kind of know what to expect. But here's the cool stuff about it, right? When I paste the title into Canvas, it automatically creates a link so that the grades upload in Canvas. I don't even have to download the CSV, upload it in my gradebook. Like, that management is removed from me. And then I'll show you this confusion report, right? So I click on the confusion report. Here's one of the articles, pretty serious weaknesses, obviously acquiring more servers, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's a really good comment. Little uncertain about the term use case. So we talked about that in class. Talking about how it relates to other classes. So ISTM 320 is systems analysis and design, and it's really the same idea. And so they're starting to see some connections between classes. So again, these are the things I really like to see. Let's look for the flaws, so critical thinking. Let's start linking between our different classes, and then they come to class a lot more prepared. And then I have access to this report to quickly know when I walk into class, what should I reinforce, and what questions do I need to address for students. All right, so that's what I really wanted to share. Happy to answer any questions y'all may have.
All right, well, thank you very much, Dr. Gamillion. Some great examples there. I love the system overview and how you talked about that. That's fantastic. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Oh, I see Katie has her hand up. So yes, Katie.
I'm outside, so I don't know what the wind is going to do to my audio. Are we okay? Okay. So my question, I've been interested in it, but I'm curious about what happens when you use a textbook and you ask them to ask questions about a textbook, like how the purchasing price works, because sometimes students are looking for the cheapest price they can find, but I don't understand how like the integration of the textbook works in terms of who pays what and how does the payment work.
So the way that I handled that in my class is my syllabus says that they will buy it through the in-course materials, but I'm sure Nolan has better and other options available as well.
I do, yes. So when you assign a textbook to your course, students would purchase that through the Perusall platform. And the pricing of that textbook is whatever the publisher set as the national pricing. We don't raise the price point in any way, shape, or form. And then depending on the publisher of that textbook, we often are allowed to provide rental options, either in the form of 365 or 180 day at a reduced price point for the student. And we also partner with all institutional bookstores. So if your students are utilizing any financial aid programs or it's built into their tuition and they can have access codes and things like that, they can go purchase those access codes for the textbook from the bookstore, and then they can input that in Perusall and have access to the textbook from there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right, Nolan, thanks for jumping in and answering that question. And at this point, we'll turn it over to you. If there are any questions for Dr. Gamillion or in general, feel free to drop those in the chat, and I will continue to moderate that and let Nolan take over the presentation from here.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Nolan. I'm an engagement specialist here at Perusall, and I'm sort of our resident expert in all things Perusall, and I do all the trainings, onboardings, and instructor and discipline specific trainings. So if there's ever a situation where an instructor says, hey, I'm teaching a physics course, could you help me build this out in accordance to my certain teaching style? I'll sit and I'll help them do that. And I'm here today, and actually Dr. Gamillion did a fantastic job. My first question for him is if he would like a part-time job at Perusall, because that was absolutely amazing. He covered all the fantastic key parts of Perusall, the confusion report, and what Perusall brings in terms of getting students prepared for class. There are a couple things though, before I jump into directly my presentation, that I wanted to touch on. And the first is the gaming system. Yes, that is very much a thing, and there are definitely YouTube videos available for students to do that. And one of the great things about Perusall is the nature of it is it's very organic for students to earn credit. So if you've never really seen it in action before, and I'll show it here in a moment, there's no, unless otherwise defined by the instructor, there's no strict rubric of a student must do X, Y, and Z in order to earn this credit, this credit, and this credit. Instead, what they're given is a little brief introduction by Perusall, and there's metrics with which the automatic scoring operates within. The content that Dr. Gamillion covered it for the comment is part of that. Whether or not they've read to the end, whether or not they responded to peers, upvoted, actively engaged with the material, it really depends on their participation, but they're not provided with that strict rubric. And so that's where Perusall shines, is because there's this motivation for students to check on what a peer says, to go back to the reading, to keep going through and checking on the material, versus I have this rubric, I'm going to go through, go A, B, C, and D, and then I never have to check back on it again. And that's where you start to lose those in-depth conversations. That's one of the great things about Perusall. So the gaming, yes, it happens, and it's definitely geared more towards the comment, like how do I just write a comment? But the great thing, and Dr. Gamillion touched on this a little bit, that Perusall provides is metrics. Most of our students that you provide Perusall to, they work through organically. It's great. And then you can actually see the gamification happen when students are doing it. They'll just have maxed out comments here, there, and they'll have missed all the other metrics that only you, the instructor, you can see. So there's always solutions to everything in Perusall. And with that being said, another great thing is that Perusall is very easy to get up and running. So I'm going to go ahead and actually grab the screen now, because that's going to be part of my presentation today. And I'm going to show everyone how to get things going. So what we tell folks is that with Perusall, it takes about, on average, 20 minutes for an instructor to have a course built and have everything ready for their students to start working on. For students, it takes them 5 minutes to get up and running. It's even quicker if you have an LMS integration. And I know that your university uses Canvas and you're on LTI 1.1. There is a LTI 1.3 upgrade available. It is free to all institutions. It's actually not held by Perusall. It's held through the LTI integration itself. But it does make things a little more robust and makes a smoother transition, and it makes it easier for you to sync grades and things back and forth. Doesn't change the properties of Perusall, but definitely a better integration. With that being said, though, because you're on Canvas 1.1, there are two ways for you to build out a course. The first being is to connect it to your Canvas instance, which if you look in the chat, I have just sent a link to our learning management system integration. This link will take you to our 1.1 walkthrough guide, and it will show you exactly how to connect the course. And I just saw a quick question. Perusall's integration and an enterprise. So yes, the LTI integration is free to use. So you can connect for free. Yep. And it does make things easier for your students. They don't have to go to perusall.com. They don't have to log in with the name or password. They simply click an assignment specific link in your Canvas instance. But you don't have to do that. Either you can have students go to perusall.com. You can have them log in with their name and email, and the process is the same. They end up in the same place. One's just a little easier than the other on the student side. But what we're going to look at today is what you can do with Perusall. And again, I've provided the walkthrough guide to get everything set up. And that knowledge base will actually take you through more of the introductory things like, how to set the basic settings, things like that. What we're going to look at today is once you have your course created, whether it's through Canvas or it's standalone, this is the first page you're greeted with. It's our getting started guide. We'll walk you through every step of your course creation journey, from what type of settings you want to implement, how you want to configure your scoring, to everything in between. And those are all very dependent upon the instructor, whether or not, from math to literature and everything in between, you're going to set things up accordingly. But regardless of your discipline and what you're using Perusall for, the foundation of Perusall remains the same, and that's your library, which can be found here. This is where you're going to upload all of the material that you wish to use in Perusall, whether it's a textbook from our catalog, a PDF, Word document, EPUB, web page, podcast, or even videos. You would upload all of those here to our course library. And depending on the material, you can organize it. We do provide folders. You can hide those folders from student view. You can label them. You can even create a student upload folder for your students to upload their own work, and then you can then assign that as the instructor. Great for peer review assignments, great for courses that are lab courses and students need to put up their lab report. All of that is possible. And once you have your library built out and your material here, that's where you can start building assignments. And just to be clear for everyone, this isn't an example course. You are going to see student names. None of them are real. They're all different versions of myself. So no worries there when you see grades or anything like that. But this is what a built out course looks like from an assignment perspective. But building an assignment is very straightforward. Once you have your material in your library, you'll just come over here to add assignment, and Perusall will walk you through every step of the way. And the interesting thing you can do is you're not limited to how many parts an assignment has. So you can assign one part and do a PDF, a chapter from a textbook or a video and have it just be the standard. Or you can start to combine things, create multimodal assignments, introduce a PDF as one part, and then have it followed up by a video, and then finish it with a quiz that you've built in Perusall. All of that is possible. It's completely up to you as the instructor. And Perusall will make sure your students have full direction on how many parts of the material there are and how to navigate the assignment. For this particular example, we'll just do a standard one-part assignment, and I'm going to touch on a few things. With a textbook, let me find a good one here. You'll notice that a textbook from our catalog is broken up into 3 different forms of being able to assign. You can assign all the content, which, if your students are ready to read 700 pages in a sitting, that's a good move. And you can also come here and you can customize a length. So maybe you want to do, the preface all the way down to section 1.1. You can do that in a chunk, or you can limit it down to just this part here. It's completely up to you, and textbooks are broken down in this way. And again, a lot of instructors will jump around. They'll do, they'll start with section 2.4, and then they'll create another part and jump to 7.1. You can do that as well if you're not going just linearly through the textbook. You can also do page ranges, and this also applies to PDFs, Word documents, things like that. If you just want to highlight a particular chunk and the page range, you can go that route as well. And once you've selected the material that you want to assign, you can click Next Step. Now here's where you can detail out the assignment. All standard information, submission deadline, assignment name, and instructions that you have for your students. So Perusall will provide a little base guide of, if you do a multi-part assignment, Perusall will say, hey, here's part 1, part 2, part 3. Make sure you go through all of them. This is where you can get a little more granular. You can say, pay particular attention to this part of a PDF, or from minutes 3 to 5 in the video, make note of this. A lot of instructors use this to say, this is where I want you to answer the questions that I've put forth in the material. And Outside of that, we do have this option for the assignment visibility date. This is if you build all your assignments ahead of time before your course starts, and then you want to just set Perusall on autopilot, which a lot of instructors do. You can make sure that your students aren't overwhelmed with material so that the assignments are released in accordance to your assignment schedule, whether it's in Canvas or anything like that. You can determine that here. And then we have the ability, you can always customize who you assign an assignment to, whether it's specific groups, specific students, or anything like that. And one of my favorite features, this is the ability to allow your students to post anonymously. So this is great for a lot of reasons. You can decide to allow them to choose for themselves. You can require comments to be posted anonymously, or you can disable it. The reason why I love this so much is because this is great for students that you don't typically hear from. Maybe they're the quiet ones during lecture, the ones who are a little bit reserved here on Perusall, because even though this is a virtual platform, even though we're not necessarily face-to-face, this is still a form of public speaking. And when students have the option of posting anonymously, we've gotten overwhelming feedback that all of a sudden instructors start hearing from students they typically don't, from the students that are a little more shy and a little more reserved. And then that translates over into them participating in in-class discussions. Great tool, love that it's here. And that being said, there's always, unfortunately, individuals that will take advantage of such systems. It does happen. And as Dr. Gamillion mentioned earlier, there is a flagging system. The flagging system can be done by students and by instructors at any point. They can flag it, remove it from the program, and then the instructor can evaluate it and put it back in if need be. And the anonymous feature is only anonymous between student and student. The instructor always knows who, what, when, where, how, and why. This is only for students. So they'll be involved in the anonymous. You will always know who posted. And the last and final step, scoring. So this is the automatic scoring system. Now, what I'm about to show you is a custom scoring configuration that you can detail for an individual assignment, or as I have selected here, you can use the same scoring settings, but use them as in the master settings, and they'll apply to every assignment you create in Perusall, so you don't have to go through the configuration each and every time. But let's say 90% of your assignments are text-based, and every once in a while you do a video. You can create a custom scoring configuration for those particular assignments. Here you'll notice you can set the score range. You can decide whether or not you want to give it threshold scoring. This is our solution to pass or fail, essentially. Like, for example, if we put a 2 here and a student earned 2 out of 3 points, they'd get full credit on the assignment. But these are the metrics in which you can have Perusall automatically grade your students' work. And these range from quizzes, upvoting, getting responses, and active engagement, to comment content where the AI is grading for quality, to opening the assignment and reading to the end. All of them can be customized except for quizzes and reading to the end. These are just very standard. You just give them a weight. And the upvoting, you can decide a combination of the two, whether you want to reward them for giving or receiving upvotes. You can determine the number of comments they must write that elicit a response. And active engagement time. This one's cool. This is actually a measurement of your time that your students are spending with the material, reading the material. They have to be responding to a peer, writing a comment, highlighting, taking a note, something in a 2-minute window in order to generate this time. And you can decide how many minutes you'd like them to earn. Opening the assignment, great way to reward your students for checking back in. Maybe breaking the reading up into chunks, seeing what's going on with conversations and things like that. And lastly, the comment content. In the master settings, this is a little bit more robust of a customization. You can decide whether you want to employ the AI or whether you want to do participation only. So you don't have to have the AI grade on quality. You can have it just grade on, did they put forth 7 comments or not? And then you can provide deadlines and any deductions for not distributing comments evenly. This goes back to what Dr. Gamillion said. This is one of the gamification preventions that we have in place. This one in particular, a lot of instructors don't really put it past 10%. Just because this is more so students don't have to perfectly space out their comments. They can go through in a natural fashion. This is more so to catch the student that's trying to be clever, and they're going to highlight the first 3 letters of the first sentence and leave 27 comments that are gibberish and think, oh, I just beat the system. This is to catch them. They'll get a little, knockdown in their points. You'll see what's going on, and then you can go from there. And the last thing that you may have noticed here, all of these percentages add up to well over 100%. They actually add up to 150. That does not mean your students can earn extra credit. What it means is that they have more than one pathway to reach full credit. So what Perusall allows you to provide your students with is an opportunity to still get full credit on an assignment, even though they may be lacking in some areas of the scoring. For example, maybe they haven't learned how to write high quality comments yet, and instead of getting that 60%, they only get 40. Well, they can still earn it from upvoting and getting good responses and still get full credit. So the opportunity for them to succeed is still there. And that's completely up to you. You do not have to exceed the 100%. You could set it up linearly at any time, and a lot of our instructors do that as well. And once you have all this decided and you click OK, your assignment will appear here in your assignment listings, and that's it. You'll be off to the races and your students will be working. Once your students start working, that's where the analytics start to come into play. And so we're going to take a quick look at that.
Nolan, can I jump in real quick? We have a question in the chat.
Oh yeah, sorry, I missed that.
No worries. I'm monitoring. That's why I'm here to help. How are high quality comments determined? What determines a high quality comment on the previous screen when you were setting up the rubric there?
Excellent question. So I'm actually going to go into the general settings here, and we're going to take a look at the full comment content. So the AI grades for quality scores based on what it was trained in, which is it studied how instructors from all across the world in every different discipline hand graded thousands of comments. And then it took their kind of collection of data and how they all saw it. And now it has what we like to say, there are no 2 instructors that would sit side by side and grade a comment the same way. Just doesn't happen. The AI comes as close to that as possible. So it's looking for quality and structure. And we do have a machine learning algorithm. It's a little bit of our proprietary blend, if you will, that does it. And it does a very good job. But at the same time, it's not a replacement. Our Perusall tool was not created to replace instructors. It was created to aid. So the AI is not a final decision. You are always in control of how you can override a grade that was provided. And you can do that almost everywhere that students' work is done. And what I mean by that is, let's take a look, and I can show you like an example of a high quality versus low quality. If we open up this assignment and we go into a conversation thread here, we can see the quality scores given here by the AI. What's considered standard medium. These would be a medium grade content. And please forgive Jonah Hill, I used him as an example. You can see that you can override this at any time. You can click this and you can mark it as high if it's a high quality. Very quick, very easy to do. But for the most part, the AI does fall on point. It can differentiate between low, medium, and high. And the exact details I can't really provide per the founders and what they tell me I can say and not. But it was done from that studying of how instructors graded real life comments by hand, and then it studied that behavior. But again, you are always in control as an instructor, and you can override that grade at any time here. Does that answer that question? Is that good? CJ, was that everything?
Yeah, that's actually, that was my question. And I had not found in my settings, I had not found that ability to only grade just based on the quantity of comments and not the quality. So I need to go back in and look again and find that in my settings, because a lot of times I'm just trying to get them to read and respond to some questions. And I just want to make sure they responded to all the however many questions I posed. And I had not found that where I could turn the quality off. So I would go back at the end of the assignment and I would click through. And if somebody didn't get, if I saw that they had posted the required number of comments, but they hadn't gotten full credit, I would just manually go back in and mark some of their comments as high quality. So, but that's under the participation-based scoring.
Yes, so if you go to settings, automatic scoring,
Okay.
and then you come over here to how to award credit, there is the option to do participation-based scoring. So that means they get full credit for any assignment. They just have to get all 7 in, or whatever number you may have here, to get that full 60%.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Of course. Yes, Katie, I see your hand.
So I have a question for those that use it, and Nolan, for you as just someone that helps people with this using it. So I have a textbook, and I've used other platforms that have asked students to engage with the content, but I don't have a set of questions for every chapter. Really, the question has always been the same: as what is intriguing you about the reading this week? Please discuss it with your peers. Like, is that sufficient for your platform, or do I have to dive deep and have more specific questions and assignment prompts for every one of my assignments?
So actually, no, there's, and I'm going to show you this real quick. I have to go outside of the course. You don't, one second. You don't need to have discussion prompts or anything like that. Once students are kind of comfortable with Perusall and know the parameters a little bit, but also one of the things that we provide under settings, welcome message to students. This is an auto-populated welcome message that all students see. Most students actually read this. It's pretty cool because it tells them how to earn credit. What I will say is we do provide a very wonderful, very interactive tour for students that they almost all universally ignore. It's fantastic. But this, they do take a moment to read, and it tells them how to earn credit, and it tells them how to participate in the system. But most of the instructors that I assist, they actually just introduce Perusall, and then things start to happen organically. They'll post questions every now and again, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are instructors who post rigorously through. The engagement's still there. That's one of the very cool things about it. So completely up to you, but I do recommend you can customize this in any way, but leave this little chunk down here. It's tells your students how to earn credit without telling them exactly how to earn credit. And then that's where that natural progression starts to come in.
Katie, on mine, I tell them on each assignment, these are the things that I'm going to be looking for on that assignment, whether it's reading through to the end and answering the 4 embedded questions. And the questions that I embed are just really token questions that just require them to look at certain parts of the text and process them. So they're just kind of, I don't spend a whole lot of time developing the questions, but it's just really kind of a touch point to make sure that they actually looked at that section and interacted with it.
Thank you.
So on that point, Patricia and Dr. Gomillion too had mentioned this, that you all post these questions within the material. And Dr. Gomillion mentioned that on discussion boards, he'd post something, and then that first person there, what have you, would respond something nice, and then everyone else would say, me too, or yes, I agree, things like that. There is a feature, which I don't know if y'all are aware of within Perusall, but once you post a question as an instructor, you have this option that is unique to you. Once you submit it, there's a puzzle piece here. And that puzzle piece requires students to respond to that question or post before they can see any of their peers' work. So one of the cool things about utilizing that is that's a way to combat that sort of, oh, I agree, or that I'm just playing off what this other person said. This forces them to come up with their own original response before they can get inspired by their peers. So it's a great tool to have in your toolbox. It's actually been a feature that's been around for a while, but a lot of instructors just kind of slipped through. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. And one of the things too that I tried to do with this example assignment is this is kind of what a thread would look like without a prompt. Someone would come through, they'd find SOHCAHTOA, they'd wonder where that came from, and then this is usually how it proceeds. They start answering each other's questions. It leads to an offshoot. All of a sudden, Jonah Hill's involved. And then you have this very robust conversation thread that just started from someone asking a very honest question. They're like, I didn't understand what SOHCAHTOA is. Yes, Kate.
So how do you manage this in a class that has 200 plus students or 100 students? That thread would get unmanageable.
It absolutely would. And that's a fantastic question. So under settings, one of the things that Perusall will guide you through in that initial walkthrough when you first create your course, and actually I can show you that real quick. But when you're in your getting started, you'll walk through the basic settings here. And hold on, I gotta move everyone around to a manageable spot. Part of the basic settings are to decide your grouping. And what Perusall will do, like let's say you had a group of 200, and to break that down into something more manageable, you oftentimes with courses about that size, I usually see groups between 10 and 20 students. So let's say you just did groups of 10 students. Now you have 20 groups of 10. Now, when you're in your assignment, you've chosen to go with these settings. Yes, there'll be just comments everywhere, but you will see it in a different format, because what you can do as the instructor is you can come here and you can go, okay, I only want to see things by a specific group. And now what that will do is it will limit the comments visible here by only group 1, group 2, or group 3. Now it's manageable. Now you can see the conversation threads happening. They're not going to be 600 or 700 comments deep. Although I have seen that. I've seen small courses with students, you know, they're graduate level or what have you, and they're groups of, you know, 5 or 6, and their conversation threads are 100 deep. It depends on how involved your students are, but you can manage it that way. You break your course into groups. Those groups are small. It keeps the conversations more intimate. It keeps them together as well. So how Perusall grouping works once you set it up is Perusall will create the groups for you. You don't have to do anything. It'll do it automatically. And it will create them based on the items in your library. So each item here will get a different configuration of students in each group, but then they'll stay together for every assignment you create from that material. So groups 1 through 10 for art history will remain the same for every assignment from this. But then when we come down here to Top Secret Canada, you're going to have a different configuration of students, so they get a new opportunity to learn from their peers. And it's going to do that for the reshuffling will do that for you. You don't have to do that though. You can create custom groups. That is possible as well under settings grouping. You can create custom groups that you detail that are static, that remain together for the entire course. And you can also sync over groups from Canvas. So if you have your Canvas group set, you can sync those over. With 1.3, it's more robust. It's a much easier syncing process, and you have a little more leeway with what you can do there. But you can customize this in any way. And then this grouping feature makes things much more manageable for the instructors. Things are more contained. And also, when you're navigating an assignment, you can come here to the all comments button. And here, like this is every comment in this particular assignment. As you can see, there's just a tremendous amount, but you can limit that. You can limit it down to group 2 only. Now this is it. This is all you see. This is all what group 2 put forth. And you can even go more granular and just go down to a student. Last thing about groups, they are unique to themselves. Group 1, even though they're working on the same material, cannot see the work of group 2. It's all private. So anybody in group 1 is going to be only seeing comments from students in group 1. You, the instructor, can talk to everyone, but the groups are consolidated information. And the last thing I want to touch on, I know we're running short on time here. Dr. Chameleon did a fantastic job showing the confusion report, but we do also offer surface level analytics here. So for every assignment, you see your most active, least active students and the most uploaded comments. The confusion report jumps in more in depth on that. And then we have our dedicated analytics. So here You can see a grade distribution, see how your students are faring. You can see when your students are getting their work submitted with our heat map. You can see a page view report. This is the last one I'll touch on because it's the only one that's not quite as self-explanatory. This is your cheat sheet as an instructor. This will show you in the material where your students are spending the most time and how many times they're revisiting certain pages. And what that tells you is a little bit of information. Usually when the average viewing time outweighs the page views, that's challenging subject matter. That's where students are taking longer to get through the material. And then once they get through it, they move on. When they're checking back over and over, but not spending as much time, that means there's conversations. They're popping back in, they're answering questions, they're moving through, and then they're hopping to the next piece of material. So it's a cool little insight for you. And as always with Perusall, I could sit here and talk to you all day about all the different feature sets, all the great things you can do. This is a very robust platform. You can make it as detailed and granular as you like, or you can set it up real quick with basic settings, get your students more prepared to class, and set it on autopilot, have everything sync back to Canvas. It's completely up to you. And in that knowledge base I provided you all in the chat, we walk you through every step, no matter how detailed you want to create a Perusall course or how simple you want to create it. It's completely up to you, and we walk you through every step of the way. And so I apologize for going over for a couple minutes, but I'm going to take a look through the chat here and see if we have any questions.
No worries. Thanks for the great explanation there, Nolan. If there are any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat or raise your hand, unmute your mic, and ask those now if you would like to.
So I have one more question about students. So I tell my students to access Perusall assignments through Canvas. And so it's always, they go to the Canvas assignment, it says, click, there's a link there to click to open the thing separately. But I think I have some who are accessing them directly through Perusall. And then when I go to my gradebook and I try to import them, they have an exclamation point next to them and they say I can't import them. Yep. So, and then on a more recent assignment, I had them watching some videos, my lectures, and then I had comments throughout the videos, and they weren't required to comment. They were really just required to watch through to the end, and then there was a quiz at the end. And then that list, I had a long list of them that I couldn't import back into Canvas, and I don't know why. I mean, it's easy enough to do it. I can do it manually, but
yeah. So that can actually happen for a couple of reasons. Usually it's the one that you just put forth, which was they're logging in through Perusall.com. The other option is you have Canvas 1.1. Is your Perusall app visible in your navigation bar on the left-hand side for your student? Okay, that's the reason number two. Instead of going through your assignment specific link, they're clicking in through that app, and they're either going into the library and watching it, or they're going into the assignment from a way that's not connecting back to the LTI. Okay. In order for you to have your students grade back without you having to manually do it every time, what you can have your students do is just click the assignment specific link that pulls them directly in, and it'll resync everything accordingly.
Okay. Another thing too that I noticed was putting students in groups. So I used my Canvas, I made Canvas groups, and I told Perusall to use the Canvas groups. And it took a while for that to settle, because at first I can't remember, I think I might have changed the number of groups or something at some point, but it's like they have to go back into Perusall to then get realigned with a group proper. There's something weird about that. Do you know what that is?
I do. That is unfortunately something that's not in our hands. That's part of the 1.1 LTI integration. It has to do with a roster sync issue and with how your students access the course. Because you may have noticed with 1.1, your roster actually will not populate in Perusall until your students click in. And yes. So that's part of the issue, and what's taking place there. Again, the 1.3 does away with that, which is why I can't emphasize that enough. It makes everyone's life easier because you won't encounter this problem anymore. For now, there's really no clean fix to that.
It's okay. I've worked around it. And honestly, I have to say that my use of Perusall this semester, I can actually see an impact in my class in the quality of writing. Because I ran this class last spring, no Perusall, no participation. I had lectures posted. I had assignments that they were supposed to do the lectures. Lots of instruction, lots of guidance about how the writing assignments were supposed to be done and what was required and examples, etc. And I still had people turning in assignments where they clearly hadn't listened to my lecture, hadn't looked at the example, really weren't following the instruction. This year, I made it so that I've embedded Perusall assignments throughout the semester, put some of my lectures into Perusall, so they have to watch the lecture, put quizzes at the end, things like that. And it's really made a difference. It's been, the TAs and I both noticed it, that the students are actually being forced to engage with the instruction more and doing a better job. So I like it. For an online asynchronous class, that's been very helpful.
All right, thanks again for the great questions. Thanks, Nolan. And again, I did drop in the chat. Every summer when we look at upgrading those tools. So this coming summer, the 1.1 to 1.3 upgrade will be going. It is a standard A&M policy not to upgrade during the semester for a number of reasons. Obviously, we have to run that through a lot of testing before we can do that. So that is on the radar to address in the coming months.
And we will, any assistance you need with that, you can reach out and I can help facilitate the connection with Perusall for the global install. And then I can also, our support team always loves to hop in and help institutions upgrade to 1.3. So when the summertime comes, please feel free to put us to use.
Great, thank you, Nolan. That is much appreciated. And other than that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. And I appreciate everyone being here today. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to Nolan. Dr. Gamillion had to leave a little bit early. He told me that in advance. So we appreciate his presentation and sharing his use case and all the great interaction from everyone who was here. So thank you to everyone.